When the Tet Offensive broke out at the end of January 68, you had already experienced significant combat. But Tet does break January 31, 68. What was the first indication you had that something big was breaking out?
Well, probably the first indication we'd had, the guys out in the field, was the morning that the radio, our platoon radio, there was a lot of chatter on the radio, and it wasn't unusual to hear things on the radio in the morning. We had our squad radio and our platoon radio, and when you were set up for the night or something on a perimeter, there was a speaker that could be plugged into the radio, and that's what they usually did, so that you didn't have to be on the handset all the time to hear what was going on the radio. So the RTO, the radio operator, he could be doing something else and still monitor the radio. And we were close enough by that we could hear there was quite a bit of chatter on the radio. But of course, the first things we heard was that we were going to be going out on patrol. We had been out on patrol um, the day before, and a couple days before that, we were on a place called Firebase LZ Evans, which was kind of east and south of Quan Tri, and a little bit north and west probably of Hue. And we had moved up into this area after we left the Quai San Valley, and we'd been on LZ Evans for just a short time, maybe a week and a half. And all the time we were there, we were always constantly patrolling in the area, and there just wasn't much going on. We'd once in a while we'd get a little sniper fire or something, but uh, really not much going on. But that morning we kind of woke up. Well, you're always awake when you're out in the field anyway. It seems like, and there were probably four guys in our position. We had a hooch and a foxhole dug, and we were outside of the what you'd call the barbed wire and perimeter of LZ Evans. If we were further out, they were pushing the perimeter out on LZ Evans after we moved in, and we were uh, just set up for the night. There were no helicopters on LZ Evans at the time. They didn't want to park them up there at night, and they would be off somewhere else parked for the night. And the morning of the 31st, we heard some chatter on the radio that we were probably going out on patrol. We didn't think anything of it. And we were all messing around with our equipment, cleaning everything, and making sure we had all our gear and water in our canteens and stuff. And again, the weather was kind of overcast and gloomy. And all of a sudden, we heard some more significant chatter on the radio that um, they wanted to speak with all the platoon leaders over at the company commander's hooch, and he was just a few paces, few maybe 100 yards away inside the perimeter. The captain had his RTOs and his medics and stuff were in that area, and all our platoon leaders from B Company went over there and spoke with him, and they came back and were talking with us. And Lieutenant Dobrinska was my platoon leader, and he said, we'll probably be going on an air assault. And he said that there was significant fighting going on in the city of Hue, and that we would be going on an air assault shortly. And from what he had learned over there, was that we were going to make an air assault over the walls of a citadel in the city of Hue. Now, none of us had been in the city of Hue, had no idea what the citadel was about, that it was an old time fort with
You,
thick rock and stone walls around it. We had no idea. We had not been there. And he told us that we were going to make an air assault over the walls and try to relieve the Marines that were inside of the city of Hue, or at least join up with the Marines, and they were being surrounded. And he said, get all the ammo you can carry. We're going to drop our packs here at LZ Evans. We'll fly the packs in this evening after you get into the city of Hue. And we all were kind of thinking about it, flying over the walls, and they're under siege, and that didn't sound like a real good idea. But the Cavs sent a couple of gunships down to fly around the city of Hue to see what it was like. and they received a lot of ground fire and some anti-aircraft 51 caliber machine gun fire from the ground around there. And they came back and said it's going to be a turkey shoot if we come in with helicopters over the wall. So at the very last minute, battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sweet, decided that instead of going in an air assault over the wall, we were going to go on an air assault to an outpost on Highway 1 there, which is called PK-17. And he said, we're going to make an air assault outside of PK-17, drop our packs there, and then proceed on toward Way as a battalion-side force on the ground. So we got all the ammo together. I had a flak jacket on that I had been wearing because it was overcast and kind of cool. And of course, we had no we had no jackets or anything like that. We just had jungle fatigues and pants, and that was it. And so I was wearing a flak jacket, and I loaded some extra magazines with 18 rounds in each one, and shoved them in all the pockets on my flak jacket and on my ammo pouches. And I had 20 loaded magazines on me. I was a machine gun squad leader at the time. I wasn't carrying the M60 at the time. And we got all our stuff together. We carried 1,000 rounds of machine gun ammo with us. The gunner would carry 100 rounds on him, and then we had the rest of the squad would each carry a can with 200 rounds in it. And we got all our ammo ready. And unlike a lot of Vietnam movies you might see where everybody carries their machine gun ammo in a big loop around their chest and all, we didn't do that. In our squad, we carried everything in cans. If you carry ammo out in the open like that, it's always getting dirty and messed up. And when you needed it, you probably had some short rounds. So we carried all our ammo in cans, and at night we would set the cans close to the gun, and then in the morning the ammo guys would each pick up a can. So we had all our ammo and got our packs together, and it wasn't long, and the helicopters were coming in to LZ Evans to pick us up, and we made a battalion-sized air assault into a large rice paddy outside of PK-17. Now, we were familiar with rice paddies down in the Quezon San Valleys, which were kind of what we'd consider to be normal-sized rice paddies, maybe a half acre or something like that. When we got into the area around Hue and LZ Evans, the rice fields were huge. They were like miles across. It seemed to be anyway, and probably were miles across. And in these huge rice paddies were villages scattered around there, and they looked like little islands out in a sea of green because they were like in the middle of these huge rice paddies. So anyway, we made a battalion-sized air assault into one of these big rice fields outside of the little outpost called PK-17. And I believe it was an old French outpost during the time the French were there. It had concrete walls around it, and it was manned by probably 2 companies of Arvin soldiers were inside of PK-17.
Yeah.
So we flew in there. We all moved into PK-17, and we were ordered to drop our packs, and they would be flown into us later that day.
You were a machine gun squad leader.
Right.
What duties did that involve? What do you do in that role?
Well, we had a machine gunner. I carried the M60 for almost 6 months after I first got to Vietnam. And I became a Spec 4, and one of the new guys moved up to become the machine gunner. Clarence Thorpe was carrying the machine gun at the time. And I was the squad leader. I carried a can of ammo, and of course you have to just take charge of these guys, and you're their squad leader. We sometimes went on long patrols, and we'd be out maybe a week or a week and a half on some kind of a patrol, like a platoon-sized patrol. But then later on, we became company-sized patrols. But it was my duty to make sure the machine gun was supplied and ready, and we had good people on the gun.
Sure.
And that was our job.
And so when we think of the Battle of Hue, I think most people think first of the Marines, but of course, the Army was there as well. I've talked to a number of Army vets who
Right.
are in this battle as well. And then you mentioned ARVN forces, and so I wanted to ask you, by this time, I imagine you've had, significant experience with ARVN South Vietnamese forces. Um, Through the Battle of Hue, what was your impression of them, of their performance? Did you feel that you could rely on them to be um, reliable allies through this battle?
Well, it was some of each way a little bit on the ARVN forces. When before we moved up to LZ Evans, they would a lot of times would accompany us on a patrol, like a search and destroy patrol. And I didn't think too much of them. They were mostly interested in going through the hooches and seeing what they could lift out of the hooches that we were moving through villages and that. And I didn't think too much of the ARVN forces. When we got up to um, LZ Evans and moved into PK 17, um, they seemed to be a little bit more organized and everything in PK 17. They had a 105 artillery piece. They had some mortar set up there in PK 17. But then as we moved into PK 17 to drop our packs, we noticed that the ARVN forces were kind of all standing around watching us. And about the time we started dropping our packs and getting ready to move out, they started taking fire from the village area close by. They started taking some mortar fire into PK 17. And they would run around, grab their M16 rifles and hold them up over their heads and get up by the concrete wall and start blasting away in the village without even looking at anything they're shooting at. They would just start shooting. So I don't know. I didn't think too much of their deal. So
Yeah.
we dropped our packs. When we were doing that, they were standing around eyeballing everything we were dropping on the ground. And I took everything I wanted to keep, any kind of valuable I might have, like an album of pictures from my wife or my camera, especially, and anything else I could carry on my flak jacket, I took out of my pack. And we dropped our packs, and they said, "We'll fly them in to you later this afternoon." That didn't happen.
Now, did you take whatever you could because you assumed that the ARVN guys would go through your stuff and take whatever they wanted?
Absolutely. They were eyeballing everything we were putting on the ground there in a big pile. And I knew they would go through everything as soon as we left. And they did.
Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. As a squad leader, a machine gun squad leader, you've seen a lot of combat before the Tet Offensive, before the Battle for Hue, but now you're heading into this really ferocious fight. Um, and you're in a leadership role. What's the primary thing in your mind? Are you thinking, here's a chance to really take it to the communists? Or what is the main thing that's going through your mind as you're in this leadership role with this machine gun squad?
Well, I don't think I was thinking too much about taking it to the communists so much, but trying to keep our people safe and alive if possible. When we set up for the evening or wherever we were, I'd try to make sure they were in a position where they could fire the gun if needed, and just try to keep our people alive, basically. That's what I tried to do.
One of the things you write about is as you're moving, there's a sniper who seems to
Right.
be pretty talented on the other side.
Very much so.
What can you tell us about the sniper?
Well, after we moved off of PK 17, we really didn't hit any sniper fire until the next morning. We moved for quite a distance as a battalion. Um, we set up B Company, part of our battalion, B Company, that was my company. We set up in an old cemetery for the night. The next morning, we continued to move toward the city of Hue, and we could see smoke rising in the not too far away distance, which was the city of Hue, where there was fighting going on with the Marines, and we were heading that direction. And we didn't go very far, and a shot rang out, a single shot, and our point man was shot in the head and killed instantly. We thought the fire came from a tree line ahead of us, and we all opened fire on the tree line, and we never saw the sniper. It wasn't too much longer after that. Another shot rang out. Maybe 30 minutes later, another guy was shot in the head, killed. So the snipers were talented. They were hidden. We never. It wasn't like in the movies where you immediately find a sniper up in a tree or something. Wherever he was hidden very well, and he was good at what he was doing. And every shot he made was a kill shot.
How many soldiers was the sniper able to get?
Well, all in all, there was a number of them. It probably wasn't the same sniper, of course, but that very first day he shot, I think, a couple people. We called in a helicopter gunship. We still had some air cover at that time. One of our CAV helicopter gunships came in, and we told him to shoot up the tree line ahead of us. He came swooping in at high rate of speed, and instead of hitting the tree line ahead of us, he hit the tree line we were in. And another guy, one of our guys, was killed by our own friendly fire from a helicopter, and a couple guys were wounded. So we didn't hear any more sniper fire after that, and we continued to move on toward the city of Hue. And as we left this one village, was an abandoned village, I'm sure the villagers found out there was a major battle coming, and they all got the heck out of the way. There wasn't anybody in the village. And we moved through this old abandoned village and started to go across an open area toward the next village. And again, sniper fired, and another one of our guys was hit and killed. So by that time, we were kind of pushing the point there, and we were out in the open when the sniper fired. The natural thing to do is everybody hit the ground when the sniper fired, which was really the wrong thing to do. We were out in the open. Machine gun wasn't my machine gun crew. There was a machine gun next to me. He tried to fire into the tree line where we thought the sniper was firing from. And I saw him, he was right next to me. We were all hit the ground, and I saw him squeeze the trigger on the M60, and the bolt went forward and it didn't fire. And he pulled the bolt back and tried it again and ejected a shell, and nothing happened. And I just looked over and I saw the lever that holds the barrel into the machine gun was up. I guess when we ran across the field, it had come open, and the barrel had slid forward, and of course it wasn't going to fire. So then I reached over and slammed the barrel in and locked it in, and the next time he pulled the trigger, of course, it started firing. But here we were out in the middle of this, between one abandoned village and the next village we were heading toward. And he began firing into the tree line, and we all jumped up and kind of assaulted and ran into the tree line. Again, there was a NVA troop who was hidden in a spider hole in the tree line, in a ditch right by the tree line. And when he saw us coming across the open area, I guess he got spooked and fired again. And then we got into the ditch, and he saw us moving along the ditch, and he jumped out of the spider hole that he was in and ran down the ditch and into the bushes, and we all jumped up to shoot at him, and we missed him. He got away. But by then, we were now into another village, into the tree line in another village. The rest of our battalion came behind us and moved into this village. Little did we know we were moving right into like a regimental headquarters for the NVA. They, of course, had troops in the city of Hue and were fighting, but this is where their commanders were located. It was in this village. It was a village called Tran La Chu. We had no idea the name of the village, but we moved into this village, and it just happened to be the regimental headquarters, we learned later on, for this whole fight in the city of Hue. It was well defended. From the estimates we hear now, there was probably 2,000 or 3,000 NVA troops in that general area right around that village, protecting the leadership, and that was directing the fight. So here we were with 450 guys in our battalion, several wounded by now, a couple killed, and here we're in the regimental headquarters basically for the NVA.
What was your assessment of the NBA? I mean, I'm assuming by now you've had a lot of experience fighting NBA, although probably not in these numbers. And then down in Southern I Corps, I imagine you're dealing with Viet Cong as well. But what was what was your assessment? I mean, you'd experienced a lot of combat by this time. You knew how well trained your soldiers were. You knew what a well-trained soldier looked like. What was your assessment of the NVA as a fighting force?
I think these fellows, these NVA soldiers were well trained and they had a lot of good equipment and they were tough. They were good soldiers. Um, they usually planned any kind of attack or an ambush well in advance, and it was always they made sure they were in superior numbers usually whenever they did sprung an ambush on us or launched an assault or something like that. They usually had their stuff together. Uh, they they had automatic weapons. They had machine guns besides their AK-47s, and they had a lot of RPGs, rocket propelled grenades. Um, they were good with their mortars. They could zero in, and they were well equipped and well trained, I think. After we moved into this area, the regimental headquarters, Tran a village out in the middle of these huge rice paddies, um, we were set up in the kind of a ditch along the outside of this, like a perimeter around this area that our battalion was set up in, and we happened to still get a supply helicopter came in to kick out some ammunition for us, some C rations, and off the supply helicopter comes a replacement troop at this time to join our battalion. And as soon as he walked up into our area, I could tell who he was. It was uh, a guy from our when we went through AIT at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Curtis Scowden was part of the permanent party there at our AIT company. Curtis was from St. Louis, Missouri. We were from St. Louis. And of course, we kind of had a little connection there. Curtis was a PFC at the time. We were all privates. So Curtis was marching us around in AIT, and he had rank on us. Well, of all the people to get off the helicopter in the middle of this conflict outside of Way was Curtis Scowden, and he had been made promoted to Spec 4 by then, and I was a Spec 4, so he didn't pull rank on us anymore. But he was assigned to our company, and not in my particular squad, but I did happen to say hi, Curtis, to him or something after he got there. Curtis was a good guy. He was again. We were set up, and the sniper got active again, and Curtis was carrying ammunition from one little foxhole that we had dug in this perimeter to the next, and he was shot by the sniper. He wasn't killed outright, but he died a couple days later. Yeah. He was killed there.
You also mentioned that, in the context of what you're describing now, you had the longest walk of your life, is how you describe it,
right.
and the hardest thing you ever did in your life.
That's right.
What is that story?
Okay, well, we were set up on the like a perimeter. Our whole battalion was on this island in the middle of these huge rice paddies, and the NVA was basically around us, surrounding us, and we were taking sniper fire. We were getting wounded people in our battalion, and we had a number of people that had already been killed. And the problem was we were outside of our artillery range. Our artillery was back on LZ Evans, and we were too far away to receive any artillery coverage. And we relied on that heavily, of course, and we also relied on gunships supporting us quite a bit. And the weather was deteriorating every day. It was being becoming more and more foggy, overcast. And we did get some helicopter gunships coming in, and once in a while we could get a supply helicopter in, but they were receiving a lot of ground fire and anti-aircraft fire from 51 caliber machine guns. And by the time we'd spent a couple days on this perimeter, we had 11 guys that were dead, killed on our perimeter, and we had a number of wounded guys. And we were no longer able to get medical evacuation. The helicopters that we relied on were either shot down or out of fuel back on LZ Evans. So the situation really became desperate at that time because we knew we were surrounded by a superior number of people, force, and every time somebody would try to bring a supply helicopter in, we would start receiving a lot of mortar fire. In fact, one evening, one night actually, um, uh, they launched a ground assault against our perimeter from the other side of the perimeter, from where our company was set up, and just in that ground assault, several more of our guys were killed. There were a lot of mortars fired into our perimeter, and we had a lot more people wounded. So the situation was getting serious, really desperate, and we had no artillery support. We had really no air cover. We couldn't get any fighter jets to come in and like shoot up the area or drop any napalm. And our battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sweet, was really a shrewd operator, and I think he was an Army Ranger, Special Forces, and had a lot of training. He decided that our only option was to leave this perimeter and move further, closer to the city of Wade, try to break out of this perimeter, and to keep from getting overrun and killed. So before we moved out or anything, we had to actually bury the 11 dead guys that we had, dead soldiers, in the mortar pit in our perimeter. They were in body bags or ponchos. This was really tough. We buried all our guys that were killed. We had a number of wounded guys that were going to have to be moved with us if we were able to get out of this place. And we had a lot of extra ammunition. They had managed to supply us with extra ammunition and mortar rounds and things, and we put all that into a big pile in the inside of our perimeter. And the battalion commander decided that we would move out after dark. We would set a charge on the ammunition and mortar rounds and all the ammo that we had in the perimeter, and we would leave and try to escape in the middle of the night. And that's exactly what we did. Lieutenant Dobrinsky and I were in a foxhole on the edge of this little perimeter, and around 9 o'clock that evening, the entire battalion moved out past our foxhole into this huge open rice paddy area. And it was really dark that night, thank goodness. There was no moon. It was overcast. It was kind of foggy and raining. And we moved out, our entire battalion moved out of our perimeter, carrying our wounded guys with us. There were some wounded guys that could walk. They were not given any morphine or anything for their wounds or pain, because once you give somebody morphine, they're down and you have to carry them. So they were not given any kind of morphine. They walked with us that night, and we left the perimeter carrying everything we could carry, all our wounded people, and after burying the dead guys in the mortar pit. They lit the fuse on this big mound of C4 and ammunition, and we left. Everybody walked past Lieutenant Dobrinsky and myself and our little squad as they left the perimeter. We were the tail end of a long line of people moving out of there.
Wow.
And It was, I thought we'd immediately get fired on from the surrounding area, but it was totally quiet. Nobody made a sound. Um, we had to carry litters with some of the really seriously wounded people on them, and I had a couple boxes of ammo and a claymore hanging on me, and trying to help carry people. But Lieutenant Dobrinska and myself and our squad, we were at the tail end of this column, and he and I and the rest of our squad were walking forward and constantly looking back because we just knew the NVA would be following us, or they would know that we left, and they'd try to find us. We walked and walked, and at least an hour or hour and a half, 2 hours went by, and we were probably about a half a mile from our perimeter when we saw the trip flares around our perimeter. We had left the trip flares set. We saw them begin to pop and run, and we could actually see the NVA soldiers running into our perimeter. We were close enough we could see their weapons. They began firing at our perimeter. They didn't know we weren't there, and they went charging into our perimeter in a huge ground assault, right exactly where our positions had been, and almost at the same instant, it was just like a miracle. The time fuse on the huge pile of C4 and everything uh, went off, and there was a tremendous explosion. Uh, Tracer rounds flew in all directions. Um, just one heck of an explosion, and then everything was silent. There was no more shooting. Everything was quiet. We just kept right on moving.
Wow.
It was a long, long walk. We moved through the night, leaving our perimeter, carrying our wounded, and
Wow.
we walked all night to get away from them.
Now
But
you
we were moving closer to Way.
now you said you couldn't get air cover, and that's because things were socked in, right? The
Right, right,
clouds and the weather.
right.
I wanted to ask you about something else. You mentioned having to bury these 11 in a mortar pit, and I'm certain that the objective is we're going to go back and get
Sure,
the bodies, so
absolutely.
there's no thought that we're going to leave them there.
No,
And then quite understandably, you say this was really tough, and what the question I want to ask you, it has to do with something that you mentioned. Um, where a soldier does something that I'm sure in years following the war, the soldier or the soldiers who did this will look back and wish that they had not have done it. So I'm not really asking about what happened. I'll read what you wrote, but the question is, what creates the conditions where a soldier will do something like what you write about? So here's what you write. So you're walking, and I looked at one of the dead enemy soldiers laying on the bridge as I crossed the canal. Someone had put a first cavalry patch on one end of a sharp stick and stuck the other end of the stick in the eye of one of the dead enemy soldiers. So we don't need to talk about that. And I feel certain that the soldier or soldiers who did that years later wish they had not have done that. So we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is what happens in the world of war that leads a young man to think in that moment that this is something worth doing.
well, I'm sure it was probably one of the guys that were trying to get across the bridge, and he saw a couple of his friends shot down on the bridge. I think one rolled off the bridge and into the canal, and there was a tremendous amount of firing going on there. And I guess it was just the pure hatred of the enemy soldiers doing that to them, and that's it just happened, I guess. And they got on across the bridge, and we were crossing behind them, and that's when I saw that. So we weren't. You'll hear reports of guys that did things like cut off ears and stuff. We didn't do. I didn't see anybody do anything like that. That
Yeah.
was the first time I saw anybody um, do something to a dead NVA. You know, normally we didn't do anything to the dead enemy soldiers. Sometimes we had to bury them if they were outside of our perimeter, like on LC Ross back in the Quaison Valley. They launched a ground assault against us, and they actually used a small bulldozer to dig a pit and put the dead NVA in there. So,
Yeah.
but there wasn't any uh, stuff like that going on.
Yeah, and so I want to ask one
Mhm.
more question about this, not to, beat this horse, um, and not to, dwell on, unnecessarily on gruesome things, but as you think about yourself, as you saw that, of course, now you look back and think, that's something that shouldn't have happened.
Right.
But at that moment, in that context, did it kind of make sense that that happened?
Yeah, kind of, I guess, because we all were just, after what we'd been through, that was a couple days after we had to escape from the NVA. And actually, what we were doing at that time was making our way back to that area to try to recover the people we had buried.
Yeah.
Some of the conditions had improved a little. We were probably going to be able to start getting some artillery support in the near future. We weren't at that time, but
Yeah.
after we had escaped from the NVA that night, and we moved up onto a hill to get some high ground. The NVA, obviously, they knew we were gone and they were going to follow us, and they did. And they began firing at us. The next morning, we were on a hill, and they were firing a mortar at us, a huge mortar, and that's a memory that sticks in my head. Um, it's almost like a bad dream. We were on a hill, and we Lieutenant Dobrinska was still alive at that time, and he was right next to me, and our company commander, Captain Knox, was there, and we were on the top of this hill trying to dig in. It was a rocky hilltop, and we were trying to get some cover, and we knew the enemy was going to come after us, and they did. And we were Lieutenant Dobrinska had a pair of binoculars. One side was broken out by now, but you could look through one side of binoculars and you could see the enemy setting up a mortar in the distance. And I had the machine gun guy was right next to me, Thorpe with the machine gun, Clarence Thorpe. And I moved over and I got a hold of the machine gun and I looked through the binocular, one side of binoculars, Lieutenant Dobrinska, and I started trying to fire at this mortar that they were setting up, but they were far enough away that I couldn't hit them with a machine gun. Now that sounds crazy because they'll shoot probably 2,000 meters easily, but I could see my tracers going out. I could see the bullets hitting, splashing in the rice field with the binoculars, but I couldn't hit the people with the mortar. It's almost like a bad dream. But they were setting up a mortar outside of an area where the NVA still had control, and it wasn't long, and they were firing the mortar at us. It must have been the 4-inch or 4.2 mortar that they had. It was bigger than an 82 millimeter that they had. It was the mortar tube was tall enough. They was about the height of their head when they were standing next. I could see the guys setting up the mortar through the binoculars, and I was firing at them, but I couldn't hit them. Our own guys were setting up our mortar on that hilltop, and they were about ready to start firing at this thing when that's when I saw the mortar explode and they were gone. I've talked to people after that, and they said, "Oh, it must have been an artillery round, one of our artillery rounds that hit them." But I said I was watching it through the binocular, and I saw the NVA actually drop a shell in the mortar, and then of course they were walking them up the hill toward us, and I saw a guy, one of the NVA, drop a shell and drop another one right on top of it, and instantly they were gone.
If I have it right, you experienced at least two close calls, once with a bullet and one with shrapnel. Is that right?
Well, there were several close calls. I don't know. Um, I don't know if God looked after me or how it happened, but um, Lieutenant Dobrinska and I were in a foxhole outside of our perimeter, and that same sniper that was picking away at our people must have had me in his scope. And I had been down, crouched down into this foxhole for most of the day, and so was Lieutenant Dobrinska. And I started to get out of the foxhole. I started to raise up. I was going to make my way back behind uh, the area where we had our foxholes dug, and um, I started to raise up, and for some reason, I just felt a push back into the hole, and there wasn't anybody there to push me. I just felt something push me back down in that hole, and as soon as that happened, a bullet hit my web ear right behind where I was in that foxhole. It was really, really weird, but that was very, very close, and I'm sure I was the guy he had his scope on that day. But the second time was we were making a ground assault against that same village, trying to get in to get to our people that we'd left behind. And we were doing something that you learn in basic training, you learn in AIT. Everybody gets online and you um, put your bayonets on the rifle. This is in training, and you begin firing at a suspected enemy um, ridge line or tree line or something in training, and you think, God, I'll never do this in real life. This is crazy. You'd be out in the open and they'd be shooting at you. We did it. We basically got online and did an assault across a large open area. Um, we were to make it to the tree line. My platoon was going to go all the way to the tree line. Second platoon was to go halfway across and provide cover for us. And we started out across this open area. We were receiving fire from the tree line. We were firing into the tree line. A guy next to me, I don't even know who he was. He was from another company. He jumped up and was in. For some reason, he thought he was supposed to be in the assault, and he was hit in the chest with a rifle a bullet. He fell down. I know he was killed. And almost the same minute, they were firing some mortar rounds at us, and probably some RPGs and stuff was exploding, and a piece of shrapnel from either an RPG or a mortar round. It must have hit the ground, bounced off, and lodged right in the top of my flak jacket against my neck. I had zipped my flak jacket all the way up, which I don't know why I did that. I guess I thought it would help me if I got shot, but it lodged right in my flak jacket against my neck, and it didn't puncture my skin or anything, but it was red hot, and I had it. I just instantly reached up and grabbed it, pulled it out, and kept on moving and firing until we got to halfway across this open area. That was rough that day too.
What did you do with that fragment? Did you throw it away or did you put it in your pocket?
It's probably still laying in the middle of that field. I didn't have time to stop. We were moving fast.
No.
We were under fire and we were firing. Um, I my magazine in my rifle was empty. I shoved another magazine in it and kept on firing. A lot of people complain about their M16s and their weapon. I had a good M16, and that sucker never jammed on me ever. And
Yeah.
we kept on moving till we got to a large ditch in the middle of the field. And we took cover there for a second, and then we tried to move on, but there was so much firing, we had to go back to the ditch. Right after that, we crossed over a little dirt road, and again, trying to push into the perimeter of Tran-Lechu. Our Lieutenant Tom Dobrinska, was leading our platoon. We were trying to push forward. We were on the side of a road in a kind of a ditchy area, and there was some brush and trees. And we were moving toward an enemy machine gun, which really had us pinned down. He stuck his head up to see where the machine gun was, and he took a round in the forehead. And my good friend Bobby Allen was with us, and he was hit by the machine gun as we tried to cross the dirt road to move up closer toward the tree line there. And I can still hear Bobby Allen hollering for help from our platoon sergeant was with us, Sergeant Melendez. He said, Sergeant Melendez, help, help, I've been hit. And by that time, we had all managed to get across the road and into the ditch. And Bob Smitherman and myself ran back on the road and grabbed Bobby Allen and pulled him off the road into the ditch where we were. And he wasn't saying anything, but he had. Well, I saw blood on his legs. I thought he had been hit in the legs. And Bobby Allen was carrying an M79, and we grabbed the M79 from him, and we were able to fire some rounds into the tree line in front of us. But later on, we were ordered to. Lieutenant Dobrinska had been hit, and Bobby Allen had been hit, and Bob Smitherman, and myself, we took a poncho that one of us had, and we put Bobby on the poncho. First we took Lieutenant Dobrinska, put him on the poncho, and were able to drag him out of that area and back to our battalion, which was on the other side, and get him to a medic. But I knew Tom Dobrinska was hit in the head, and it was bad. We came back and got Bobby Allen, put him on the same poncho. We had to kind of drag him till we got into a bank of a canal so we could get out, and carried him back and to a medic in our battalion. And we returned back up there, and then the battalion commander said, pull back. And so we pulled our platoon back to their perimeter. We didn't get into Tron Chu that day.
I want to read a little section from your memoir, and I want to connect it because you describe one soldier who loses it, who just kind of loses his mind and has to be medevaced. And given everything you've described, I guess it's not surprising that some folks crack up. But I want to connect that to something you write when you're writing about Bobby Allen and Lieutenant Dobrinska. So you've just found out that that neither of them made it, that both of them
right.
killed in action. You write, I knew I had to be strong when I faced my men and when they asked me about our lieutenant and about Bobby Allen. If I showed any weakness or tears, the morale of my men, already shaken, would be shattered. Those were just kids back there on the perimeter in our foxholes. They were looking to me to get them through this. In my mind, I said, please, God, give me strength. I reached my squad on the perimeter. All my men stopped what they were doing and looked at me. Without saying a word, I shook my head from side to side. One of my men said, both of them? And I said, yes, both of them. So both Bobby Allen and Lieutenant Dobrinska. You write there that you have this sense that you have to be strong, and what that passage kind of implies is that we've already had one soldier crack up, and what you write there kind of implies that it's possible that could happen again. And so as a leader, I have to, in a sense, perform. I have to put on a performance of strengths to help ensure that none of these other guys lose it or completely just give up and lose their morale. So all of this is my assumption that I bring to reading that passage. Does it make sense as you hear me say that?
That's right. I guess I was a few years older than most of the guys in our platoon. I was probably as old as our captain was. I was older when I got drafted, and I turned 24 when I was drafted, I believe, and so I was 25 years old at the time, I believe, and these kids were 19 years old, and we'd been through a lot. We went through that assault against the tree line the day before, and when Dobrinska was hit, Bobby Allen was hit, and we had to pull back to the battalion perimeter there. And that next morning, I went over to the battalion medic area there, and that's when I learned that both had been killed. And there was a medevac helicopter coming in to pick up Bobby Allen and Dobrinska, and there was some other wounded people they were picking up. And our platoon sergeant, Sergeant Melendez, had somehow learned that he was supposed to leave the field, and he got on the medevac helicopter with the wounded and the dead, and he was gone. That was our platoon sergeant. Our platoon leader was killed, platoon sergeant gone. There were three E5s, myself including. There was Rob Wadzak. He was E5. Shields, another guy. We had last names in Vietnam, by the way. We didn't go by first names usually. And Shields was one of the E5s, and myself. And we basically took over what was left of our platoon. We had a lot of guys lost and killed and wounded. And these kids, they looked up to me. I was going to be their platoon sergeant, and I was a platoon sergeant then. Rob Wadzak took over as the platoon leader. And this was before the guy actually lost it, and that was a few days after this. We were at that time we were beginning to get some artillery support. Back at LZ Evans, all this time we were out in the area outside of Way. Back on LZ Evans, where our artillery and our supplies were all located. A major, Bill Scudder, was a major at the time. And he had been a former company commander in our battalion. He was promoted to major. He was now in charge of getting the artillery and our supplies out to us in the field. He wasn't out there with us. He was back at LZ Evans trying to move our artillery up closer so we could get some support. And he was doing that. Without him, we'd have probably never made it. But by the time this person I wrote about that had lost it, we were getting some artillery support. I think what they had done, they moved a self-propelled 8-inch howitzer down the road from LZ Evans closer to where we were outside of Way. And we had called in for some artillery support. We were pushing toward the city of Way at that time. And we were receiving a lot of enemy fire from a village between us and the city of Way. And we called in for some artillery support, and they were using an 8-inch artillery cannon at that time. And when those cannon fire came in, and the one shell hit pretty close to where our company was, and it's a tremendous explosion, and some of the trees were blown into the air. That's when one of the guys and I think he was in C Company just absolutely lost it, and some of his men had to actually restrain him, jump on him, and the medic ran over and gave him a shot of morphine to put him down, to calm him down, I guess, and he was later medevaced out of there. We were on this hill, and I hadn't written to my wife, of course, for a long time, and we had escaped from the NVA, and I was out of, I didn't have any paper, I had a pen, and I wanted to write a note to her and tell her I was okay. And we had a medevac helicopter come in and pick up some of our wounded guys on this hilltop that we had carried all night. And another medevac came in a short time later, and I had, and they kicked out some C rations then, and I tore the top of a C ration box off, beef spice with sauce. Anyway, I tore the top of this C ration box off, wrote my wife a little note, and this is the note. And I wrote her address on it. I said, I'm okay. I'm on a hill outside of the city of Way. And I handed it to the medevac helicopter pilot when he pulled into our top of our hill to pick up some wounded. And this is my wife got this in the mail. She knew I was still alive and I was okay.
Can you read what you wrote on the back of that?
Yeah, I think so. Um, I had it dated at February 7th, 1968. I said, "Dear Jan, we've been very busy lately. I didn't usually go into detail on letters too much, and I told her I haven't had much time to write, and we're on a hill outside of the city of Way. I'm going to try to get on a chopper. Let's see, I'm going to try to get this on a chopper as soon as I can. I'm okay, and I'll write again soon." That's what I wrote on the back of this piece of cardboard and mailed it to my wife. My squad and myself, we were on a dirt road or a pretty big trail that was coming out of the city of Way, and um, we had taken some cover behind some bushes and trees there alongside this road, and I was leaning against a tree, and I saw a couple guys coming down the trail, and I could see that they didn't have any weapons with them, but they were coming fast down the trail toward us, and my men were on each side of the trail behind some bushes, and I was standing behind a tree. And just as they got up close to where I was standing, I stepped out in front of them with my M16, and they just put their hands up and stopped, and we captured both of them. They were definitely NVA soldiers. They were trying to make a break for it, trying to get out of the city of Way. We pulled their shirts off, and they had marks on their shoulders from carrying packs and straps and stuff. So I don't. They were shipped out. I don't know what they did. They shipped them out with the Arvins.
Sure.
Probably. Who knows what happened to them?
What memories do you have of Vietnamese civilians? There are a couple, I think one or two photos that I have of yours of Vietnamese civilians that you saw after the battle.
Right. They were. They had all left. They must have got word that there was something big happening around Way. And these villages we were going through, they were abandoned. There were hooches there, but there weren't any people in them. And they must have all headed for high ground. I don't know where they went, but as soon as the Battle of Way was over, they were moving back toward the city of Way. There was a kid trying to sell me his pet rooster, and I had my shirt off, and this was after the Battle of Way was over, and we were actually on our walking back toward LC Evans. We had no helicopters coming in to pick us up, and we had walked part of the day, and we set up for the night. And I had my shirt off, and I was going to shave. I hadn't shaved for a month, and this kid came up, and he had a rooster, and he was trying to sell me this rooster, and I didn't want the rooster, but um, while I was talking to him and took his picture, I guess it was his sister. She was behind him, and she was trying to sell us some candles. And while I was talking to her brother, she was taking the watch off of my shirt. I had a watch, and I kept it in a buttonhole on my collar. And after she left, and after the little kid with the rooster left, I went over and picked up my shirt. My watch was gone. And anyway, I'm sure she helped herself to my watch.
Never get a break.
No, but that was probably the highlight there. As we marched, we weren't marching, we were walking on each side of Highway 1 back toward LZ Evans. It took us 2 days to walk back there. Our battalion commander had finally was able to get his command helicopter in the air again, and he was up in the air, and he flew down Highway 1 right over the top of us as we were walking, and as he went over us, I saw him raise his right hand and salute us as he flew over us, and that was really good.